As the town considers in the coming months the cost of investing in new infrastructure for the schools, renovation or replacement of the high school, families are looking at what happens at the end of that process and the cost of a college education. The burden of debt that it's placing on kids more and more as they consider that option, and wondering what the alternatives are. It's changing a lot of assumptions. And here to talk about all of this with me today is Dr. Ira Rubenzahl, President of Springfield Technical Community College. Ira, thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me, Don.
What are some of the assumptions that you're changing on a daily basis about the role of a college education in today's economy and in today's culture?
Well, there are certain trends that have continued over the last couple decades that make college education more important than ever. It's very difficult with a high school education to raise a family, to have a job that's sustaining. So some college is becoming really essential to have a decent income in the United States. And that could be an associate's degree in a program that we have. It could be a bachelor's degree or something even beyond that. But, and the numbers of Americans who are going to college is at an all-time high because of the economic imperative.
And how does that translate in terms of numbers, enrollment numbers in community colleges? I mean, there's certainly, community colleges have been really prominent in the news and the discussion of that. Are your numbers
Yeah, our numbers
up?
are up over the last 6 years or so. We're up about 30% in enrollment. We're over 7,000 students. We were in the fall of 2012. I haven't gotten our 2013 numbers yet. So there was a big run-up because of the recession. There was also a run-up because, for demographic reasons, the high school classes were increasing until about 2009, 2010. So actually the high school classes are smaller than where they've peaked. So nationally, community college enrollment is probably flattening out at this point.
So we're doing this in the context of East Longmeadow community and really thinking about, as the population here at the high school looks ahead to their college options. Why is community college, STC in particular, maybe more of an option for an East Longmeadow kid than it might have been a few years ago?
Well, I think we're a very good option. We were a good option, we think, 10 years ago, but we're still, I think we're even a better option because of the cost of higher education. Over the last few decades, the cost of tuition has gone up. It's gone up faster than wages. And not only has it gone up, but federal and state support has leveled off, in some cases gone down. So the colleges need more money from the students in order to operate because we're getting less from the government, and we're passing those costs along to our students. So the run-up in tuition and fees isn't just that college is more expensive. It's actually, at the community college level, no more expensive. We're just getting less money from the Commonwealth. So we are still, though, the least expensive alternative. We're about $5,000 a year for a full-time student, taking 15 credits.
Wow.
Which is, a lot less than the $35,000 typically at a private four-year school or the publics are less expensive, obviously. I think UMass is around $13,000. So that's a big issue. Now, it's going to be a somewhat different experience. You could live at home and commute. We're primarily a commuter school. Of course, you could also get an apartment and commute, but we don't have the residential experience that you'd get at a traditional university or a college, four-year college. Nevertheless, we think we're a really good value, and students certainly can do their first 2 years, save a lot of money, and then go on and complete at a four-year school. And
historically, I think the four-year schools have looked very favorably upon students who've done that.
Yeah, they do. We have great agreements with the private four-year schools in Western Mass and the publics. We send a lot of students, for example, to UMass Amherst. It turns out that our transfer students to UMass Amherst actually do better than their so-called rising juniors. So if you start at UMass Amherst as a freshman, and you look at that class and they get to be juniors, our transfers actually do better than their own juniors. Now, having said that, not all of our students go to UMass,
right.
But they've got something under their belt that seems to work when they transfer.
So let's step back a bit now and talk a little bit about the history of the college. You've been there for...
This is my 10th year. I've been there for 9 years.
And prior to that?
Prior to that, I was president of Capital Community College in Hartford, Connecticut. Not that different than Springfield, somewhat different. Another urban community college, yeah.
So just give folks a little bit of a history of STCC, where it came from, when it started, and how long it's been really doing what it's been doing.
Yeah, so we were founded in 1967 as the Springfield Technical Institute by Edmund Garvey. And then in 1968, the Armory closed, the Springfield Armory. And the state decided, and the local political leadership decided it would be great to have a community college. So they basically took the Springfield Technical Institute and located it at the Armory and made it a community college. So one of the reasons we have technical in our name, we were founded as more of a career-oriented institute. And our original programs were primarily technical, though we've added a whole series of programs, including transfer programs. So in 1968, we moved into the Armory. We have 1 million square feet. It's a lot of space. We have 200,000 square feet that's vacant. It's not even, we're not even using it right now. And I like to say we moved in 1968 and we've been moving in ever since.
And I remember certainly in the past, a fair amount of new construction at a period there in the 70s, 80s.
Yeah, our academic buildings are primarily new and sort of look like more traditional college classroom buildings. But our other buildings are 19th century. They're historic buildings. The entire campus is a National Historic and a National Cultural Site. We're the only college in the United States that's on a National Historic and National Cultural Site. And
that Armory site dates from the Revolution?
Well, officially it dates from 1793. There's a plaque there that George Washington, so when the new government was set up, Constitution, don't forget, I think the first election was 1792. When the new government was set up, and of course George Washington was the former general of the head of the Army, they wanted an armory to build weapons, to design and build weapons. So they established one in Springfield, and then they established the second one, I think a few years later, at Harper's Ferry, which is it's now West Virginia. It used to be part of Virginia, so you know your history. West Virginia split off from Virginia during the Civil War. So what was interesting was during the Civil War, the Harper's Ferry Armory was destroyed by Stonewall Jackson. He came up the Shenandoah Valley, and obviously a big target for the Confederacy to knock out the weapons productions for the Union. But of course the Springfield Armory was never touched, and a lot of the buildings from the Springfield Armory and the history dates to the Civil War because it was so important to the war effort. So a big expansion during the Civil War.
And important to the economy of the city, really. Huge. Right up until...
Not just the city, the entire region, from New Haven up into central Vermont, up down the Connecticut River Valley, became a manufacturing center, first for small arms, Savage, Smith & Wesson, Colt, all those companies are there because of the Armory, because they were designing the arms at the Armory. And then other manufacturing. So at one point it was the Silicon Valley of the United States, this region. It was the manufacturing center of the United States.
And a real training center for precision machinists.
For precision machining. And a lot of the advances also for interchangeable parts took place at the Armory.
It's fascinating.
Yeah, it is fascinating.
It's really fascinating. So let's talk a little bit about STCC's role in the greater Springfield area, the Springfield community in general, because if you want to break down your sort of population according to where they come from.
Yeah, fewer than half of our students come from Springfield. I think about 40%. So
Okay.
the majority of our students come from towns like East Longmeadow. We are a very diverse college. We're kind of tracking pretty close with the country. So we're about 15%, 16% African American, about 2 or 3% Asian, and we're now approaching 25% Latino. So the country's kind of moving in that same direction. And so we're pretty close to what the country as a whole is doing. So students have a very great experience there because they will see other cultures, a lot of language. We have a lot of foreign students or immigrants who speak a whole bunch of languages. So it's really when you're in class, it's really not, it's not a uniform population when you come to class. And our ages tend to be very disparate. So we have 18-year-olds, we have seniors, we have a lot of people coming back from the military. So our average age, I think, is 27. So it doesn't look like a typical undergraduate college where you have 18 to 22-year-olds.
And I can, I guess, testify that having had a similar experience and been through an undergraduate college program with a lot of older students and students who had been out in the world, and some had kids, and really being exposed as a 17-year-old from Longmeadow, Mass, was a tremendous experience for me, and probably the biggest part of my education.
Yeah, I think it's really great for our students to be in a classroom situation like that.
In what ways are you involved, if you are, and I think you are, with the city directly in terms of, reaching out to, I know that you have a program.
We have a couple of things. Yeah, we have dual enrollment.
Dual enrollment, and we have a guest here who's.
We have one of your interns, one of your students working in the studio is using that. So any high school senior or rising senior, I think you can be finish your junior year, can take one free course per semester or during the summer, day or night, distance learning on campus for free, absolutely free. So we have about 160 to 200 students each year from the area high schools. Now, some of these students will go on to other places, but it's really a great experience for them to be taking everything from philosophy to calculus, whatever they want to take. There are some rules. If you go on our website or go to your high school counselors, our dual enrollment, it's called College Now, excuse me. It's called College Now. And we have a lot of interest from high schools. That's one thing we're doing. Another thing we're doing is we just started a Gateway to College High School. This is a program basically for students who are in danger of dropping out of high school, and we do this exclusively with the city of Springfield. So we have now, we just opened in September, we have 44 students. We got to get them to complete their high school, and while they complete high school, they'll be getting some college credits because they'll be taking some college courses, and pass their MCAS. When they do that, they will get awarded a Springfield public school diploma, and they'll have some additional college credit. We're actually hoping that they'll finish with us. So again, it's completely free, and it's quite frankly oversubscribed. We had a lot of applicants for these 44 slots. We think we've got a great group of young people. Good. And they all have different stories. I mean, quite frankly, some of those students, I think the high school environment didn't work for them. Some of those students fell behind for various reasons. But we think it's a really good program because it's a very nurturing program. It's small, and they really like being on the college campus. It's like it's a fresh start for them to be able to finish high school. You have to be 16 or older.
Okay.
You have to be over 16 and behind in your studies. So anyone out there, don't get behind in your studies. Just start this program.
So that, and I know maybe there's some other things you want to talk about, some other programs you want to talk about.
No,
but
yeah, those are two good ones.
All right. So that prompts me to wonder if, from what you see, we're certainly going through a lot of discussion about how should the curriculum change. We're shifting from the model that we've had since, 94 or something, ed reform, to now the Common Core.
Yeah, the Common Core. I know a little bit about that.
Just turning everybody upside down.
Yeah.
what are high schools doing right? What are they doing wrong? And are there, just comment on that. I mean, you see the kids coming in, you know, are there some things that you see from the wisdom of your perch as the president of a college that you'd have some thoughts about?
Well, that's a good question, but it's a difficult question because there's so many. Again, most of our students aren't kids. They're either young adults or they're, in some cases, middle-aged adults.
Fair enough.
So, and they've come in. Sometimes they're at a high school for 10 years or more. Sometimes they're right out of high school. So it's a little hard to generalize. I would say we would like our incoming students to have better basic skills, especially in math and their English and writing skills. Those are the key. If you have that, you can pretty much do everything. You know, Massachusetts does have the best high school system, public high school systems in the country. The data is really very clear about that. We really do a good job in Massachusetts, and I think you do. I'm guessing you do a very good job in Long Meadow, East Long Meadow. The urban schools in Massachusetts, however, are not so good. As you know, the dropout rates are much higher, and the success is much lower. So I think in Massachusetts, overall, the urban schools need more attention and need to make more progress. So, but in general, we take students wherever they are, and we'll try to get them where they need to go. I mean, I don't know what else to say.
No, except that, so
we love them to be at a higher level when we get them. But
no, but because I think that you know, we have the issue of the four-year college, the private college, the elite schools. I mean, there are certainly a bunch of kids
right
on a track in this building loading up on AP courses
right.
because they're going to apply to Brown, they're going to apply to Middlebury, they're going to apply to Harvard,
right.
And there's that.
Yes.
And what that model serves going forward, it's obviously serving the kids, but in a bigger sense.
Right.
And then you have essentially the largely suburban, affluent suburban high schools from which those kids are coming versus, you know, a different model. And what do you see as some of the things in an urban school district?
Well, but not just urban. I would also include East Long Meadow. We get a lot of students from East Long Meadow. And they're not that different from the Springfield students because we're not getting the top students, don't forget. So I would say there are a couple of things. One is because college is more important now and a greater fraction of high school graduates are going to college. I think it's like 70% or something. It's very high, 65% nationally. That there needs to be more attention linking the high school curriculum to the college curriculum. Now for the kids going to Brown, you know, they've done all these AP courses, they've really figured that out. But for the average student, I think there's less attention paid. There's more attention paid to get through the MCAS, but less attention paid to be successful. What does it mean to be successful in college? That's a different question. What do you need to be successful in college as opposed to what do you need to get through the MCAS? And quite frankly, I have real problems with the MCAS and the whole No Child Left Behind because MCAS is a 10th grade test, just to give you an example. It's a 10th grade test. If you don't require mathematics, for example, in 11th and 12th, if those students are able to graduate and then they go to college, they've had 2 years without math, and now they have to take math again. They've forgotten so much. Right. So you need to think more about what's going to happen at the college level. The majority of your students are going to college, not just the Browns. And what does that look like? And I think there needs to be more coordination at the state level, quite frankly. The state spends a lot of money on Chapter 70. Some cities and towns get more than others. Obviously, Springfield gets a lot compared to East Long Meadow, but East Long Meadow still gets Chapter 70 money. Right. There needs to be, and the state's supporting us, 50% of our money is coming from the state. So there needs to be more alignment between what we're doing and what is happening. That's the key, I think, what's happening at the high school level. I can give you some examples, but that's the overall key.
So, what about cost?
I was hoping you'd get to that. So we talked a little bit earlier about cost, that we're the cheapest, least expensive higher education alternative for anybody in Massachusetts. But there are challenges. And we're fortunate. This year was a very good year for us, this starting September 1st, this new academic year, because the Commonwealth, which is the legislature and the governor, for the first time, really since the recession started, they didn't cut us, they actually gave us more money. So we've had a series of cuts. We're actually, if you look at the over 10 years, we actually had a higher budget from the state in 2002 than we did in 2012 and 13.
Wow.
I mean, 10 years, we're actually getting fewer dollars. We had a series of cuts. So this is the first time the Commonwealth gave us more money. The deal was, it was a kind of deal. They said, okay, we're going to give you more money. You can't raise your charges on students, which we're happy to do. So we'd like to continue that. We need to continue to not raise our charges and hopefully get each year a modest increase from the Commonwealth to allow us to do that. So that'll help control our costs. It'll help at the university also. UMass did not raise their tuition, neither did the state university. So everybody we froze, and we need to continue to do that to make public higher ed more affordable. There's some other things we need to do that will help. We need to use technology better. There's actually, college textbooks are much too expensive. They're absurdly expensive. And it has to do with the fact that the consumer doesn't pick the product. In other words, you go out and buy a car, you decide if you're going to buy a Chevy or a Lincoln or a Ford or whatever you're going to buy, or a Toyota, you decide, and which model, you decide, or whether it's new or used. No one's making that decision for you. But the way our classes are organized, the math professor decides on the math book. The philosophy professor decides on the philosophy book, and the student has to buy whatever they decide.
Right.
And so it's a kind of an unusual situation with the consumer. Now there's an opportunity to break through that. And by the way, the textbook industry has had a huge consolidation over the last couple of decades. There's really only 3 textbook companies left. They have different names sometimes. But for college textbooks, there's really only 3 companies. It's really an oligopoly.
Right.
It's really a kind of a quasi-monopoly. There's not enough competition. So, and they play games. They always keep putting out new editions, which are not needed, and then you have to buy the new edition. So there's a way of breaking through in this, which is called open educational resources, which is basically free textbooks that you can download electronically on your device, or, but yeah, that's basically the idea. That's coming. I really think that's coming. Average college student pays over $1,000 for textbooks a year. If we can reduce that significantly by using this electronic textbooks, that'll be huge. And our students they all have devices nowadays. I mean, they have either they have an iPad, or they have a
absolutely
they have a smartphone, or they have a computer available. So they got something. So that's a given for almost all of our students. So that's coming. That'll help, and we're working on that actually. It's a little. People think about higher education. This is true across the board. We are very conservative. What I mean by that is we don't change easily. I mean, we're institutions that our roots are in the Middle Ages. Right. You know, the gowns and all that stuff. The mortar boards. All that stuff comes from the Middle Ages.
Right.
So we just don't change easily. It's the way we're constructed. So. But we need to be more, I think we need to be more responsive to the public around costs. I really do.
You see that attitude among your peers in the private college world, or?
They're under pressure, especially if they're not an elite college. I mean, if you're Harvard or Brown, you know, they've got 10 applicants for every seat, and they've got a lot of rich alums, and they've got most of the people who apply are rich, let's be honest, are well off. Not all, but a significant portion. So, but for the next level of, you know, the sort of more garden variety, the more, how should I say it, the non-elite
right.
Privates, yeah, they're under a lot of pressure. They're under a lot of pressure because they don't have that alumni base with all that money. They don't have this big endowment. and they have costs, yeah. So they're under pressure, absolutely.
So, recently report bridging the higher education divide. Talk about that in the context of this cost issue, because we do seem to have this kind of two-tiered system.
Yeah, that was a very important report. What's happened in the United States is that most African American, Latino students and poor students are at the community colleges. And more middle class and wealthier students are at the four-year schools. Now, not exclusively so, obviously, but that trend has actually accelerated over the last 2 decades. So we had more economic heterogeneity in 20 years ago at the community colleges. We had more mixtures of high and low income people than we do today. And the four-year schools, the universities and colleges, actually had more mixture of poor and rich kids 20 years ago compared to what they have today. And that's not good. It's not good for our country. I don't think it's good for our educational system. So this report sort of talked about we've created a new segregated model within the United States. And not enough of our community college students transfer. A number of them transfer, we talked about that. But we need to get more of them to finish it at the four-year level. So you've got the poor kids, the black kids primarily, the Hispanic kids, especially from the urban areas, going to community colleges. The wealthier white kids primarily going to the four-year schools, and then they're not transferring. Wouldn't be so bad if they would finish, they could finish. So there's some things we need to do about that. For example, the report suggests that the four-year schools should set aside 5% of their junior class for community college transfers, and they should pay for it. They should give them scholarships, because a lot of these kids can't pay $35,000, $50,000 a year.
Right.
Now, some schools, in fact, in this region, we're very fortunate. Smith and Mount Holyoke, and to an extent Amherst College, has had a long-standing relationship with our community colleges, and we send students to those, and they do that. And I was just talking to the president of Mount Holyoke the other day, and 5% of their class is community college transfers. In fact, she's a community college graduate, Lynn Pascarella. So, but if every four-year school, now by the way, the publics, it's autumn. I mean, we send a lot of the Westfield States and the Amherst and those kinds of places. That's a given. But all the other privates need to step up and say, we understand this is an issue. We want to start opening our doors to community college transfers. So, for example, can you imagine if Harvard said, let's say Harvard, I don't know the exact number, it's around 1,200, I think, in their junior class. If said, okay, we're going to take and hold 60 slots open for community college transfers. And if you're a community college student, that's something you can shoot for.
Right.
And, you know, and Brown and BU and Northeastern, et cetera, if they all did that, that would be huge. And that was a recommendation in the report. Another recommendation was to try to figure out how to get more mixing of incomes within both the four-year schools and the two-year schools. How can we? So there were a series of recommendations, but this is a really big problem, and it's kind of like grown up around us, and people don't understand it. It's a national issue, but it tracks with what's happening in the country, which is we've had this huge run-up of wealth concentrated in the upper 1%. Right. And everyone else, especially working people, their income has actually gone up. The average person in the United States, their income has gone down. For 20 years, it's been either level or going down a little bit. There's a whole generation that is not seeing economic gain. So this is a big national problem, and this is a kind of a piece of that. But if we could deal with this problem, we would create more economic opportunity for people of modest means.
Well, right, because you set up this a really terrible situation where you, on the one hand, say the only way out of the sort of economic situation that we're in that gives people a real opportunity to survive is to get a college education.
Right.
But by the way, you go this way,
exactly.
You go that way.
Exactly. And
you've essentially carved out a path to opportunity for a smaller and smaller segment.
Exactly.
By structuring it the way. So even though on one side of your mouth you're saying, go get a college education,
right.
But we're really going to make that available to this group of people
Right.
effectively, then, so you struggle with that all the time.
Yeah, we try to, let me tell you how we address that locally. Locally, we try to give the best value and the best education for all of our students and the best opportunity either, again, to finish and get a good job or to transfer. That's what we're trying to do. But we do that at very modest cost. I mean, this was shocking to me. I don't know if some of the people out there have ever heard of Swarthmore College. Swarthmore is an elite college, small, in Pennsylvania outside of Philadelphia. The president of Swarthmore, I read this like 3 or 4 years ago, said, well, Swarthmore's cost is about $50,000, but we really spend $80,000 educating a Swarthmore student. And I said to myself, you spend $80,000 per student? We're doing it for like $10,000. Why does a Swarthmore student get $80,000 value, right, and why is our student only getting $10,000? I mean, that's an enormous gulf.
It is an enormous gulf.
Huge. And it's just not right. And it just perpetuates this what I would, distinction by income in the United States. So we have to address this. Well, it's one of those things. By addressing some things, other things begin to happen.
Right.
This is one place you could start. You can start other places. We should have higher minimum wage. It's a scandal in this country that people work full time for the kind of wages. Was it $8.75 now in Massachusetts? $8. And California just passed 10. It's a scandal. You can't raise. You can hardly support yourself on $8 an hour if you work full time. You just can't do it. So it's a scandal. Why, the richest country in the world, why we have all these people working at $8 an hour? It's absolutely a scandal. So, we need to start addressing those things.
So I just recall I was visiting my daughter in Florida last November, and there was a report on, and one of the things that I think involves community colleges nationwide, and I don't know to the extent to which STIC is involved in this, but was touting this partnership between private business and community colleges, where the community colleges were going to provide the training. In the old days, in a union shop, the union was really responsible for training workers, teaching them on the necessary skills, doing that through the union organization, so that the employer had a steady pool of highly skilled labor to make their business profitable. That went by the wayside. Then it's up to the business to foot the bill for the training, or because businesses are looking for trained machinists or whatever, and kids aren't doing it. So where do you get them?
So we do have a series of partnerships like that, Don. And we get contributions from some of these area businesses, and we have partnerships where they allow our students to train in their facilities. So let me just give you two quick examples.
Sure.
And the models vary with the field. So for example, nursing. We have great partnerships with the local hospitals and the local health organizations. Our students have to have clinical hours in nursing, and they do that in the hospitals, for example. And when they're done, they tend to be hired by these organizations. And they tend to give us some resources to help us do this. With precision machining, with the machining industry, we have a great partnership with the shops are organized through an organization called Western Mass Machining and Tooling Industry. And we have a partnership where their employees come to our facility to get some additional training. And we work with them to make sure the curriculum is right for our own students, and they hire our students. So we have great partnership. In fact, we just invested a lot of money to upgrade our machining curriculum, our laboratory actually. Just to give people a flavor, if you go into one of these companies, they've got these machines that are $500,000 and $1 million machines.
Right.
I mean, this is huge. You can't compete with China or India by doing low wage, low investment production. You can't compete. Their wages are much lower than ours. But if you have high capital investment and you're doing really high-end products, then you can compete. And so these companies have very high capital investments with these so-called CNC, computer-controlled machines. We train students to run these machines. They don't want anyone on running those machines that don't know what they're doing. They're too expensive.
Right.
And we have this great partnership. So we have a series of partnerships like that. And we don't want to conduct programs where students, career programs, where students can't get their jobs at the end. It's very important for us. So if we have a field where students aren't getting jobs anymore, one of our health programs we've suspended because we think we produced enough people. It's called nuclear medicine. These are people who make the solutions when you go in and get a test, like an MRI.
Yep.
They give you an injection. Someone has to make that solution. We train students. They make very good money, but we think there's enough of them, so we suspended the program. So we don't want to educate students if there's no job. So we try to be very aligned with the needs of the region. So anyway, yes.
So part of the compact there, the social compact, is
Yes.
that as a community college using public resources to participate in this, there's an implicit agreement that the wage on the other end is going to be a livable wage.
Yes, and they are. In these programs, they make decent money. So these machinists start, I don't know, $55,000. And plus there's overtime. They make good money. The nurses make good money, as you know.
Right.
Yes, we want to be in programs where our graduates make decent money.
Right. So one thing we haven't really talked about is the sort of the general academic programs at the college, just as a college, what people traditionally think of as your courses. You have a great faculty. You've got people who've been there for a long time, gifted educators. Tell us all the great things about STCC, because we've sort of dealt on these social economic issues, but it's an institution of higher learning, and that in itself, when you get to be our age, I mean, you get to be there because you're the president, but I long to be back in college.
We can arrange that time. So let me just talk a little bit about our program structure. All our programs have a what I call liberal arts core. History, some English, math, those basic things. The liberal arts transfer has more of that than the career programs, but they all have that because we think those skills and communication skills are really important. We have a great faculty, very stable. People love working there. The faculty is very committed to our students, and they're always trying to change our teaching to make it more effective. We're not perfect, we know that. So it's a very vibrant place. The other thing we have, I mentioned earlier that we have a very diverse student body, and the faculty is becoming more diverse. And we have a lot of activities on campus, lectures, events on campus that celebrate and enrich student life. So for example, I think on the 22nd of October, if I can put in a plug.
Sure.
Isabel Wilkerson, who's the first African-American woman ever to win a Pulitzer Prize, is coming to speak. And she wrote a book called, I always get this title a little wrong. I think it's called Under the Warmth of Other Suns. Under the Warmth of Other Suns, I think is the right title. And it's a history of the African-American migration from the South to the North and West, basically in the 20th century, starting in the early 20th century. There was this huge out-migration. And she has it's a great book because she follows three individuals. She actually tells their individual stories, where they came from, what happened to them, their family history. It's really a great book. So she's going to be there on the 22nd. But we have a series of events like that on campus. They're free. Some of these events, we bring high school students to them. We actually will bus them in some cases. And so there's always a lot going on. Besides, the typical, we have a great basketball team, soccer team, et cetera.
And you have a radio station?
We have a radio station, yeah.
Old radio station.
Yeah, I should talk a little bit about the radio station. WTCC, 90.7 FM on your dial. You can also get it streaming. I think the call letters are www.wtccfm. You have to put the FM in. And it's actually a fairly powerful station. It's a 5,000 watt station. It's really run by the community. College owns it. College hosts it. But we have a whole series we have about 150 volunteers that have programs and help run it. So it's a great thing that we do.
And it's been going for years.
Yeah,
years. I can remember it.
I think it just celebrated its 40th anniversary. Yeah, it's been going on for years, and there's jazz, there's some interviews, there's Latino programming in the afternoon. Yes, and it's 24/7. It's on all the time. So yeah, you should.
And a great art gallery.
We have an art gallery, and right now actually we have this is Hispanic Heritage Month, so we have an exhibit by Ed Cohen, who's a local photographer, and we have an exhibit on the Hispanic history of Hispanics in Springfield. So the last 30 years or so, 40 years, he's got pictures of different events and well-known Hispanic leaders in the city of Springfield. So that's that's going on right now. We have an art gallery. So there's a lot going on.
Very good. Well, I hope, it's wonderful to have you here and have this kind of a conversation for the benefit of, students. I know, I'm here in the high school, and I ask my students, what are you thinking about? And some of them have their plans. They've got their schools picked. But I have a class now of 12 students in the morning, and there's 2 of them who are contemplating going to STCC and doing that transfer route, and I was like, yes.
Thank you, Don.
Because I've been through the other route, and it's worked out great, but it costs a lot of money.
Costs a lot of money.
Costs a lot of money. But thanks again for coming, and look forward to having you back.
Thank you, Don.
I'd like to have this conversation over and over again.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you.